Right then, so this is the first actually in a series of videos I'm going to do actually on some of the cars which we've got. Different to normal because most of the videos that we do as a company, we buy cars in, sell them, but we generally show the cars in operation just to establish if there's any issues on them before people come to see the vehicles. But now we're entering lockdown, and I'm going to have very little to do because obviously we're closed for business during this period, or most of the time. It gives me an opportunity to go through a few of the cars and actually give a bit of a review of them, which is a bit different to what we normally do. Quite often I talk about things I like on the vehicle, but I don't spend that much time doing it. So that's why I thought, whilst I've got a bit of time, I'll do it. And I'm actually starting with my own personal car. This is an RX400 hybrid, as it says in the video description. And the first part is literally just I'm not doing an outside thing. I'm just literally going to go inside here, go through some of the controls, things I like, and some of the things I don't like, but also drive the vehicle, and again just to give feedback on what I think of the car. And it is personal opinion. It's not there to kind of inflame people or antagonise people, but I'm sure I'll manage it somewhere down the line. But yeah, inside the vehicle, these are very much of an era, and which is why I personally like them. I think it was a very much an upmarket car for its time. The dashboard layout is a very, very, very well equipped car, which is I love them. But also what I like about them is the fact that it looks nice. It's a very simple, easy to use dashboard. The modern way of doing things is obviously have big sort of tablet type screens here, and then sort of multi-functions and press buttons and that kind of stuff, which I find utterly perplexing most of the time. This is very simple indeed. It's also really, really, really well made. Lexus, this is a car that's now 11 years old, which is on 87,000 miles. And apart from being a little bit dirty inside, where I've been using it, it's literally with a clean, it would look like new. The build quality is amazing on them actually. And again, not to say they're perfect, they're not. With the RXs with lots of miles, you can get the odd little squeak or rattle from the inside, but they're, by comparison to other manufacturers, they're hardly any. The common ones we tend to get, just on the far corner by the little speaker and the door pillar there, you'll see I've got a bit of foam wedged in there because they just get the odd little squeak to when it touches against the dashboard. And that's pretty much it. They're absolutely, because they're so quiet inside, any noise becomes an irritant, quite obviously. But inside, very simple, easy layout. You've got a very kind of old school sat-nav system built into the car, and again, if you pop the car into reverse, you've got a nice parking camera, which works really nicely and very, very clear and easy to use. The sat-nav system is antiquated, in all honesty. It's quite frustrating to use. I've got a Garmin in here as well, which I tend to use on my phone. But you press the button there. It's a little bit slow in responding. You go into address, and it's a little bit slow in the way it operates, but not bad. It does work. It's perfectly usable. On top here as well, obviously you've got your radio. If you turn it on there, again, all very simple and easy to use. Climate control system, again, run through here, all push button on the screen, and the info button, which is one of my favourites actually. If you go to trip info there, it tells you basically what the car's doing as you're driving along, which I'll have operating while I'm driving the car in a minute. But there it just says we're just using the battery of the car, the main battery cell there. There's loads of charging because I've just been for a drive. And if you press the consumption one, it tells you in a graph what your MPGs are over the last 5 minutes, because it was actually downhill most of the way. I've been achieving 60 miles per gallon. Obviously I haven't. I tend to do lots of short trips, and I'm averaging like 28.7, which is actually more realistic. Longer trips, I'll be over 30. So it's actually a pretty efficient car. What don't I like about that screen, apart from the sat nav, which is pretty old, is the fact that with the climate control system, you've got to go into the screen to operate it. I still prefer when they have a separate climate control system underneath, so you're not reliant on going into the screen to do it. Lots of modern cars have now reverted back to that, which I think is a much better way of doing it. But all the switchgear is really lovely sort of damping and controls, which you get with Lexus. They do it really nicely. Sound system on these is brilliant, by the way, because it depends on the model you get, but if you've got the sat nav, you generally get the Mark Levinson stereo with them as part of the upgrade, and it's a really, really good sound system if you like your music. It's very, very, very clear. Dashboard in front is just simple. It's just big speedo in the middle, the fuel and temperature gauges, and then you got your kilowatts instead of a rev counter. So you put your foot down, you see that going up and down. Tend not really to look at it. It's just there. But it's just a really pleasant interior to sit in. Of this era, again, you've got really good visibility all around in the car. Seats are incredibly comfortable. They're heated. You've got the little buttons down there to heat them as well. Multi-way kind of electric adjustment on them, but you can't fail to get comfortable. So the first impression when you get in them, it feels like it is, it's a high quality kind of luxury motoring of its era. But my favourite part is the driving of them, which is why I've always loved these cars, and I still find it a little bit of a sense of occasion. So when you put it into drive, it just drives like a normal car. Just put it into drive and drive. But when you pull away, generally you pull away on battery, and I just still like that kind of silent movement of the car, and it's just so smooth. It just makes you feel a little bit posh. I don't know why. There's a lovely kind of smoothness, but immediately the engine, or pretty much immediately, the engine tends to kick in. But seamlessly, you don't feel it. It's just wonderfully, wonderfully done. And I think that's the thing about the car I've always loved, is that it kind of makes you feel a little bit special in the way it goes about sort of propelling you forward. Because with the hybrid system, its interaction between battery, engine, and the gearbox, because the gearbox is one of these what they refer to as CVT, constantly variable transmissions. So there is no gear change. So you put your foot down and you just gain momentum, but without any kind of jarring or jolting or a sense of it changing gear at all, because it doesn't. And it was so far ahead of the game at the time that to be able to sort of get in the car after a long day and just feel so cosseted and so smooth and quiet in the way it operated was unheard of, in all honesty, because most of the cars of its type and size would be sort of big turbo diesels, kind of X5s, MLs, Q7s, that kind of thing, XC90s. And they all, fine cars in their own right, but they couldn't hide the fact that they were diesel. They were quite gruff sounding, especially at slow speeds. When you pulled away, even as good as the gearboxes were, especially when new, you'd still get a discernible gear change, and some were more abrupt. When you put your foot down to get a kick down, it might drop down a couple of gears and sort of thump you in the back. But these, you put your foot down, engine builds up a lovely V6 kind of roar to it, and you kind of catch up with the car. And in some reviews, especially when these were brand new, most motoring magazines sent their same test drivers in to drive them, and they just drive them like hooligans. And they complained that the CVT meant that the engine would drone, when you were flying along. But most people drive as I am now. They bought the car to be pampered, to be luxurious, to be smooth. So you aren't shoving your foot down the whole time. So for 99% of the time, it is absolutely amazing in terms of the smoothness of the car and the way it drives. 1% of the time, if you put your foot down hard, you get the engine to sing, and it does. And it's a nice sound. It's not a diesel rumble. It's a nice sound. but that's the only time you ever really experience it. You said if you're particularly sort of leaden-footed as a driver, and someone wants a sporty car, then these aren't the cars for you. That's the long and short of it. But for me, I still struggle to find, even with the very latest, most modern cars that can compare to this in terms of how it pulls you along. It's a wonderful, wonderful vehicle. What adds to that, of course, is the way the car rides. And I'm going on a deliberately horrible bumpy road now, just to kind of exaggerate. Probably the worst aspect of the car for me is the fact that, again, it's of an era where suspension, was good. It's very, very comfortable most of the time, but it can get caught out. There's smaller, sharper bumps tend to give it a bit more body motion than you'd ordinarily expect. But for most of the time on most roads, it is again so cosseting, so comfortable to drive. But it has its flaws, as all cars do. The later 450 that came after this, I'm guessing it's slightly wider in its tracks. It feels more settled on the road. There seems to be less kind of motion like that from the car. And as I said, it's not to say that this is bad. It isn't. It's just picking up on any kind of imperfections I can. But no, it's a supremely comfortable car that has stood the test of time far, far better than most of its competitors. And of course, reliability-wise, they're in a completely different league because they're incredibly tough. And it brings me back to the engine and hybrid system. Of course, Lexus have now latched onto the fact of their marketing. They're calling it the self-charging hybrid because they know that people who are looking at electric cars are suffering kind of range anxiety, as they like to refer to it. But this is just this doesn't give you that. It just put petrol in the normal way. You've got a fuel gauge. The infrastructure's there to give you plenty of fuel at any given time. You're not waiting to fill up the fuel, apart from the few minutes you're doing it. You're not charging the car up or anything. So they've latched onto that anxiety aspect of it, I guess. Other things that I like about the car, well, it's pretty much all of what I've said. It is that feeling that at the end of any day, no matter how tough a day you've had, it's a car you don't mind getting in and doing a trip. So I do quite a lot of physical stuff, and I get achy a lot of the time. So getting low down into a car that's got a stiff ride is horrible. But to get in one of these, doesn't matter what frame of mind I'm in, it's just a really relaxing car to be in. Finally, I think the only other thing that I can think of that some people might find unnerving, I guess it would be the best expression. The braking system of the car is really good. They're solid brakes, but because it's using the brakes to regenerate some of the battery or replenish the battery, you can get a feeling that the car's sort of pushing forward under braking sometimes. So you put your foot down, you can feel a bit numb, and it makes a woo noise as you're doing it. I find it quite endearing, actually, and you get used to it really quickly. But some people jump, oh crikey, it feels different. It's nothing wrong, it's absolutely fine, but it's just it's something that, again, that you tend to get used to very quickly, but some people find it slightly unnerving sensation. But that's really it. I'm going to turn around here, actually, because I realise I've gone down a little lane I wasn't intending to. But it's my personal car. I bought this, and the reason I bought it, I suppose that's the reason for the review as much as anything else, is why would you consider buying one of these when comparing it to maybe its competition or otherwise? Well, for me, I've become tighter with money over the years, obviously. I just don't want to have the risk attached of buying something like some of the others on this vintage, because they can be very problematic and very expensive to fix. We've sold hundreds of RXs over the years and never touched the hybrid system on any of them. And that's not to say they can't have issues. It's just to say we've not had one, and that's honestly the case. But I want a car that, as I said, is just very comfortable in operation, very smooth to drive. and one that's just a little bit different to the norm, I guess, and that's why I bought it. As I said, the video is only a bit of fun while we're in lockdown. I'm going to do a few of them on a few other cars as well. If it's of any help to anybody, or if someone's got some questions about the ownership of the car they want to ask me, don't ask me too much technical stuff. I don't really know, in all honesty. I just get in and drive the things. But you know, in terms of kind of what I've experienced day to day, by all means, send us a text or a message, then I'll be happy to answer them.